Welcome everybody to Unit 12, the urinary system. This is part of our medical terminology course, and let's dive right in. Our objectives for today. First, we're going to understand the basic anatomy of the urinary system. Next, we're going to look at some new word parts, so make sure that you have your word list handy. Next, we're going to build some new terms, right? This is a medical terminology course, so it's all about building the terms. We're going to look at common diseases of the urinary system, and then we're going to take a look at some of the abbreviations that are associated with the urinary system. Okay, let's first take a look at the anatomy of the urinary system. I think it's really important to take a look at the parts that we're talking about, or all of those little word parts that you're trying to put together, and the diseases we look at aren't going to make any sense. Okay, so there's going to be some terms, but here you can see to the right a basic outline of the urinary system. First up, we have our kidneys. There are in fact two. I know here I've just labeled the right kidney, and remember, while it's left on our screen, it is in fact the right kidney because we are looking straight on at a patient. If that is something you don't remember, please go back to units 1 or 2 where we outlined this in detail and how we identify the right versus a left on a patient. There are a couple of word parts and root terms that we use for the kidney. The first is shown here. This is pronounced Reno, Reno, okay, R-E-N, and we have our combining vowel of O. The other one that is commonly used is this term, nephro, Nephro. And remember in pronunciation, the PH, when they're put together in a medical term, it is pronounced more like the F sound in the English language, so it is pronounced nephro. Okay, so the kidney has two potential terms, Reno and nephro. Next up, we have a tube that comes from each kidney down into our next location. So while I have just labeled one of them here, okay, the tube that goes from the kidney down, okay, is referred to as the ureter. The ureter. The good news is that the root term or the combining form for this part is just the ureto, right? So really just that last section up to the ER, which is just a pertaining to. So the ureters. Next up is hopefully an organ that you recognize, that is the bladder. So the root term that refers to the bladder may not be quite as obvious as the one with the ureter, but this one is cysto, C-Y-S-T-O. And if you look at your word list, it does refer to a bladder or a sac. So the bladder is a circular organ, and it contains the urine, right? It holds onto it, and it opens and closes a little bit like a balloon or a sac that contains that urine. There is one root term that is less commonly used for the bladder, so most of the time you're going to see that root term cysto, but on occasion you will see this one that is vesico, Vesico, V-E-S-I-C, with the combining vowel O. All right, the last component of the urinary system is the tube that leads from the bladder to the outside, and this one is the urethra. Urethra. And the good one for this one is that the root term here is just urethra, right? So nice and easy to remember this one as well. So from the kidneys to the bladder is the ureters, and from the bladder to the outside is the urethra. And just a little trick that I use to remember how this one went is that there are two E's in the term ureter. There are two kidneys, so two ureters. There is only one E in the term urethra. So there's only one urethra that goes from the bladder to the outside. Okay, while not technically part of the urinary system, I did want to point out these two little yellow components that sit on top of the kidneys. We are going to take a look at these with our endocrine system and what that is and what they do. But those are your adrenal glands. So while they're part of the picture, I just wanted to point out what they were so that they weren't confusing to anybody. But they sit right on top of the kidneys. Okay, but again, remember they're not directly related to creating urine, and they're not technically part of the urinary system. But just so you know what those little things that sit on top of the kidneys are.